Greetings, quilters. We made a quilt for our grandson 6 years ago, and he thinks that he has outgrown that quilt and wants one like his brothers. We made this quilt so that he feels like he is part of the older brothers. We created a layout for this quilt with the EQ8 program to check material requirements and sizes of the pieces. His mother told us his top 3 favorite colors are green, yellow, and reds. With our plan in hand, we purchased the needed fabrics and are ready to begin. We start by ironing the fabric to remove deep wrinkles. When ironing, we iron in the direction of the warp thread. The next step is to cut the fabric to size. When cutting the fabric, we use an extra ruler and a weight to help keep the fabric from moving. We cut all of the blocks before moving to the next step. With all of the pieces cut, we stage them at the sewing machine. We decided to use one dark green fabric with one of the other favorite colors for each block. We start by sewing the 2 fabrics right sides together with a 1/4 inch seam. For this quilt, it is important that all seam allowances are the same. Don't mix scant 1/4 inch seams and large 1/4 inch seams, etc. Sew the 4 sides of each block. Cut each block diagonally both ways. Finger press the seams to the dark side. Lay out the 4 pieces to make sure that the arrangement is correct. Sew the blocks together. Be sure to nest the seams as you sew. It may help to pin these seams before sewing. Finger press seams in the desired direction and then press the blocks. The triangular pieces have edges that are cut on the bias. Pressing will avoid distortion caused by ironing. For the next step, we need to cut the block into 9 relatively equal pieces. The block is about 13 inches square, so we will have 9 pieces about 4.3 inches wide. To cut this block, measure and cut from the center seam 2 1/8 inches, making 9 equal blocks. Using painter's tape, we mark the ruler at 2 1/8 inch near both ends of the fabric. Mark the side of the ruler that will be used to make the cut. Marking the ruler makes it quick to position the ruler on the fabric and helps prevent mistakes. We like to use 2 rulers where possible to keep the fabric from moving. If the fabric moves, it is easy to realign before making the cut. After cutting the parts, we lay them out on the table and arrange the pieces to give us the desired pattern. It is easy to make layout mistakes, so be careful and double check each block. When moving the block to the sewing table, recheck the alignment before sewing. Sew the 3 pieces of each row and then sew the 3 rows together. Finger press as you sew. All blocks should be the same size. We trim the ears and any wonky edges as needed. With all of the blocks sewn, we lay them out and move the blocks to create the desired pattern. The blocks are ready to be sewn together. We sew 2 blocks at a time and put them back in order. We sew the next set of blocks and then the next set of blocks. This process works for us, but you could just sew all 6 blocks together. Sew the rest of the blocks to complete each column. We sew the columns together in sets of 2, and then sew 2 sets of columns together. Then sew the 2 halves together. The quilt top is ready for borders. We check the color options for the borders. We decided to put a 1-inch red border and a 4-inch light green border to finish the quilt top. We cut the border pieces and sew the lengths together. We like to lay the border pieces out to see how they look and to make sure we have enough before we start sewing. We mark the centers of the border strip and the quilt top to make sure the alignment is correct for the beveled border corners. The top is now finished and ready for the quilt process. This is the back of the quilt. This is the batting. The back is placed right side down on the quilting frame. Then the batting and then the quilt top is placed right side up, and all 3 layers are thumbtacked to the frame. The quilt is pinned with special bent quilting pins, and then it can be removed from the quilting frame. We test various threads to see which color is preferred. We chose white for the bottom side of the quilt. We machine quilt using a stitch in the ditch process and use the fluff and stuff process to move the quilt through the sewing machine. The quilting is finished. We use a large square ruler to cut the corners and our long ruler to cut the straight edges of the quilt. The quilt is now ready for the binding. We lay the binding out to verify that we have enough. Our preference is to pin the binding to the top of the quilt and then sew it. We pull the binding to the back side of the quilt, pin it, and sew it with a hem stitch about 1/4 inch long. We make a nameplate and sew it to the underside of the quilt. This quilt made our grandson happy, which made us very happy. We thank you for your time and hope this gives you some ideas for future projects. Thank you very much.